wrap up a couple things. The U.S., for all her faults and flaws, and there are many that I see that need to be addressed right now in Washington, D.C. and in Springfield, U.S. remains history's best hope for achieving morally ordered liberty. It's still the great beacon of hope for emerging nations as they witness this remarkable blessing brought forth by religion, political, and economic freedom. Our freedom has come at a very high cost, and now, I believe, is under siege by many in Washington. It's now our time to step up and fight for our liberty and our freedom so that we can preserve for our children and grandchildren all that's been given to us. I absolutely believe that is the threat that we're facing in 2010, that so much that has been given to us is under siege. Last quote, started with Abraham Lincoln. I want to end with Abraham Lincoln. He said, "We have been the recipients of the choicest bounties of heaven. We've been preserved these many years in peace and prosperity. We've grown in numbers, wealth, and power as no other nation has ever grown. But we have forgotten God. We have forgotten the gracious hand which preserved us in peace and multiplied, enriched, and strengthened us. And we have vainly imagined in the deceitfulness of our hearts that all these blessings were produced by some superior wisdom and virtue of our own. Intoxicated with unbroken success, we have become too self-sufficient to feel the necessity of redeeming and preserving grace. Too proud to pray to the God that made us. It behooves us then to humble ourselves before the offended power, to confess our national sins, and to pray clemency and forgiveness upon us." Great words, I love that. But it's Abraham Lincoln. Clear what he thought our responsibility was and who we are responsible to. So maybe this was a little bit different talk than we expected this morning. I hope it's okay that I talked a little bit about what I've been learning and why I feel like it's important for us to be involved. For me, I honestly feel like my responsibility is to run for office this year. I felt that even this summer, God stirring that in my heart. This wasn't something I was planning on doing. It just really, I feel like now is the time that we need to step up. We need to stand up. We need to shout out and say, you know what, we're heading in the wrong direction. We're losing our foundation. We're losing people of moral character who are doing this not out of a sense of public service, but they're doing it to line their own pockets, and that's wrong. We need to stop it. We need to change it. So, again, my name is Randy Hultgren. I've had such a privilege of being able to talk with you this morning. I know some of you are going to have to take off, which is great. I'd love it if Chris, if you'd be willing to come up and if we could open it up to some questions that you all might have, and maybe shift it more either to stuff that we've talked about or some more policy questions. I think maybe that's more appropriate. Rather than me tell you what I stand for, you can ask us what we stand for. So thank you all.
Who's going to go first with the first question?
I will.
Okay. Here,
Right now, I can talk about it.
That's okay. The folks back there.
Right now, there's a unified voice in Congress for the Republican Party, and they voted together on just about every issue, and the answer is always no to whatever the issue is. What would you do different?
Great question. And I think the answer is no on the ultimate vote. The answer is not no when they're providing, I think they had 600 amendments to health care. Many of them were public alternatives. So there's a very active process in providing alternatives that are out there. I think they're very engaged in going to committee, debating, presenting ideas, finding alternatives that I think are good alternatives to be debated on. To me, I don't like this idea now where we passed the House and the Senate and the conference committee. We heard over and over and over again by the administration and the leadership out in Washington that this is going to be an open process, that we're all going to be able to see it. And now we're hearing, you know what, no, it's not going to be. We'll give you 1 hour on C-SPAN of the conference committee, 1 hour, and then that's it. The rest of it we're going to do behind closed doors. You know what, that's not an open process that we should see. So I've seen, and I know Chris feels the same way in Springfield, that unfortunately there's so much power in a couple leaders, whether it's in Washington, D.C. or down in Springfield. There's one guy who is the most powerful guy in all of Illinois, and that's Mike Madigan, Speaker of the House in Illinois. He controls the agenda. I saw it so clear when it was in the House. I still see it in the Senate, where it leaks over, and he still, I think, has a pretty strong impact on our Senate President, John Cullerton. But those two guys really run the show. They control everything that comes for a vote before us. So Chris and I made the very best idea that really makes sense. We've been out talking to you, we're getting your ideas, we're coming down as a senator, that I want to present the ideas of my constituency to be debated on, to be discussed, and they won't let it happen. They will not let it happen. They control the debate. They control what gets out on the floor. And the same thing happens out in Washington, D.C., and both parties have been guilty of it. We've seen it in times where Republicans in Springfield have been heavy-handed, and I absolutely believe Republicans in Congress blew it so many times where they had opportunities to really address issues that needed to be addressed, and instead they were too interested in expanding government or kind of taking care of themselves and their friends and family. So it's not a partisan thing, but it is an openness thing, and that's something I've been fighting for. I have served in the minority the entire time that I've been down in Springfield, and have been a vocal member of the minority, of stepping up and trying to get things heard, have things passed in that area. But ultimately, I don't control what gets out of the Assignments Committee. I don't control what gets out of the Rules Committee. And I won't control, if I'm Congressman, what gets out on the congressional floor to be debated. But I still will be doing everything I possibly can to make sure that we have that open debate, that we're looking at all options. If it comes right down to it, where they don't give me that option to present what my ideas are in a public forum, it's going to look like I'm just saying no to everything. But in reality, I'm working behind the scenes. I'm working hopefully out in front of the scenes. But we need to change that power of leadership. And I think rank and file members on both sides of the aisle would agree with that it's misguided when so much power and authority, it was never the idea of the Founding Fathers, that so much power would be vested in the Speaker of the House, whether that's in Illinois or in Washington. And they had no idea that so much power would be vested in Majority Leader in the Senate in Washington, D.C., or the President of the Senate here in Illinois.